Marx is also a thinker, and remember we were talking about him before, so I'm not going to go in as much depth because we talked about him. Yeah, we did. Basically, he takes Hegel's idea of the dialectic, takes Hegel's theory of the dialectic, and says it's about this clash between classes. Okay, social classes. The history of human beings is not, as Hegel puts it, a clash of ideas, but instead it's a clash between those that have and those that don't have. It's a clash of these different groups. And those that have use everything in their power to maintain their power, to maintain their illustrious position. So they create morality and they create institutions that says you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, because those things perpetuate their dominance. So for Marx, the dominant social class creates the dominant ideas. Not, as Hegel puts it, the dominant ideas create the human society, but it's the other way around, right? It's not that, for Hegel, it's like ideas are influencing humanity, right? We have these ideas we want to change because those ideas sound good. Marx says no. What happens is, in fact, there's this clash between different classes, and the dominant class will put in place its ideas to perpetuate its dominance. So ideas are a result of the dominant social class. Marx, therefore, has a profound impact on the study of history. Right? When we look back at the French Revolution, we would say, where did these ideas come from? And we say, the bourgeoisie thought of these ideas. Right? That's a Marxist take on the French Revolution. Because it's saying that these ideas are coming from a certain social class. Now, Marx, of course, argues that the working class, the proletariat, will rise up in the revolution of the proletariat and overthrow the dominant class, the bourgeoisie. And they'll overthrow the bourgeoisie government, and they'll replace the bourgeoisie values like competition, greed. These are the bourgeois values. The dictatorship of the proletariat that will be put in place after the revolution of the workers will replace this with the spirit and the values of the workers. And the values of the workers are equality. And the values of the workers are cooperation. And so what they'll do is they'll end private property, and therefore end all these different classes, and therefore we'll have harmony, because there will no longer be different classes to clash. And so we'll have harmony, and therefore the result is no more problems, the end of history. And government, which is only used to perpetuate the ideas of the dominant class, will no longer be necessary, right? So he thinks that, humans will just live in this ideal system. And government itself will wither away. Now, Marx, what's interesting about him is he's looking back in history, and he's taking this very, in his opinion, scientific approach, right? Looking at these things, finding evidence for the demise of the bourgeoisie, finding evidence for the rise of the workers, saying that this is an inevitable process. History tells us this is inevitable. This will happen. This is not the utopian socialism of those more romantic thinkers like Owen, that thinks humans can just go out and create their villages, these agricultural communal villages. Or Charles Fourier, who writes that there's these phalansteries of 1,600 people that will live in, and people will all work together because they'll be able to share and create this ideal society on their own. For Marx, it's not based on these, well, in his opinion, utopian ideas of them, but instead very scientific, very rational. Now, Darwin is another mid-19th century thinker who also has a profound impact. And his impact is on science and beyond that, on culture, because of the way that people take his ideas and apply it to the human realm. And so note that this is an ongoing trend throughout this entire discussion, taking scientific concepts and applying it to humans, right? Trying to look at nature and trying to think, how does this apply to human beings? Darwin, of course, comes up with this idea of natural selection. The theory is evolution. Evolution happens through the mechanism called natural selection. And natural selection, as we noted in our scientific discussion, was basically this process where certain beings within a species have traits that help them pass along those traits, that help them reproduce those traits. And the traits that are better at, being better at helping things reproduce become more and more widespread, and therefore become dominant in a species. And so a species over time evolves to those traits that make it stronger and allow it to perpetuate those traits. And we don't need to go into lengths, but Darwin is not a social Darwinist. I can't emphasize that enough. But other people take his ideas and apply it to humans, right? Like Herbert Spencer is our our whipping boy social Darwinist we always bring up. But Herbert Spencer says, look, there's lazy people out there, and that's why they're poor, is because they are less fit. And Spencer comes up with this idea, survival of the fittest. And note how in this worldview, it's very, it's very opposed to the Christian worldview, the sort of Catholic piety that emphasizes poor and loving the poor. In this worldview, no. In fact, the poor are weak. They've got inferior genes because in the late 19th century, the mechanism of natural selection, the genes is what the traits are that are being passed on. These people have inferior genetic traits, and therefore helping them is not actually good because it's interfering with evolution. And it's not just poor people that are a target of social Darwinists. Also, foreign non-Europeans are, right? So this is an era of imperialism, and social Darwinism informs that, right? Europeans think, look, we're the most advanced because we're the most fit to survive. We have these traits that allow us to perpetuate ourselves, and therefore we have the right to spread, just like any other species can spread with their superior traits. And so therefore, Europeans look out at Asians or Africans and say, well, we have the right to conquer these areas because these are inferior people. And also, of course, within Europe, right, there's notions about the inferiority of certain species, of certain people within the species when it comes to national and ethnic and religious minorities in an area, right? And so this idea of social Darwinism in certain species, this sort of pseudoscience that applies Darwin's notions when looking at nature, applies it to humans. A pseudoscience leads to more racism and more anti-Semitism in the late 19th century in Western Europe. In these areas that are supposedly advanced and enlightened, we see, in fact, a lot of, very hurtful and discriminatory ideas. Just bad ideas. Or notions about the inferiority of these people.